Okay, it looks like we are on the air, and a little clickety-clack steampunky introduction. Welcome to an hour on the 23rd February 2026 in our ongoing year of uncertainty and doom. Don't forget, Tortugan WordPress, all sorts of cute stuff there, freebies for the taking. The PDFs, they're now over 20 years old, but there are blips along the way. I think the content still holds up rather nicely. Well, anyway, where are we? What did I have? Oh, there we are. Ongoing the Titans, our cute little dinosaur. Again, the graphics are halfway decent on it. And this is the Luskin week, so we get another things when they're starting to dredge some bottom of the barrel here, though. That's going to be fun to look at. Anyway, Sarfati and Tay's chapter, one of the longest in their book, goes into a great deal of detail to try to downplay any of the connections between feathered dinosaurs, which they're arguing aren't feathered dinosaurs, they're just flightless birds, courtesy of Alan Fiducia, courtesy of Teogarten Lingham Solier, the fellow that orbits in that Fiducia thing. And Lingham Solier's stuff is clearly what he's riffing off of as they try to slap holes in this Sinosauropteryx dinosaur that has feathers, and which Fiducia and others were insisting were collagen fibers. Now, the funky part is, and I'll be putting a link up to one of the papers that Lingham Solier has done, the 2007 one. There's a 2013 one that Sarfati cited that, alas, I only have the abstract for, so I'll just be putting up the link to that. Anyway, Sarfati and Tay are citing kind of an end run in addition to relying on Lingham Solier, but to try to argue that because some organism that's a cousin is even more developed at the same time towards the bird condition, which is the case for this Archaeorhynchus. This is all around 125 million, 120 million years ago, from a 2018 paper from Wang et al., which I'll be putting up the link to, so you'll be able to read that as well. As if that invalidates the general proposition that critters with dinosaur feathers are also developing bit by bit, stage by stage, at varying lengths into a bird-like lung condition, as well as heart, all sorts of stuff. But by relying on only those Lingham Solier and Fiducia, they're kind of giving the game away because they're channeling the secondary source. Now, this will come as a terrible shock to you. The idea that people whose mindsets are built on selectively citing things that reinforce them, selectively cite somebody who selectively cites information that reinforces the preconceived position. La-di-da. Well, the tiny fly in the ointment on the collagen argument, and it's been around for a long time, has to do with the fact that melanosomes had been found in these supposed collagen fibers, which is a thing that shouldn't be there, but would be there if they were feathers. And further analyses since then has continued to reinforce the point that the collagen argument just isn't flying. It isn't working. It's not being bought, except by people like Sarfati and Tay, who want it to be true ever so much. Now, that 2010 Wang paper, which I will be putting the link up to, is for some curious reason not in Sarfati and Tay's citations. You think there may be a reason why? Hypothesis one, they know about the paper's existence but are not going to tell their readers about it. Possible. Or two, they're relying too heavily on somebody that doesn't discuss it either, the Fiducia crowd. So either way, take your pick. But at any rate, 2010 is a long time ago. And water has gone under the bridge quite a long time. So the notion that these feathered dinosaurs are just collagen fibers and not actual feathers is just not tenable. It's obsolete. So we get off to the cute little Luskin list. Oh, and by the way, the Olympics ended today. A pleasant little ceremony there. Things went off without a hitch. Everybody seemed to be enjoying themselves enormously, especially after Vice President Vance left so they could stop booing him. We'll see what happens in 2030 when we have the Olympics, Winter Olympics in France. And then, of course, the exciting one to see is the Los Angeles Olympics in 28, and what the conditions will be then, and which president or vice president will not want to attend. Hoover did not attend the 1932 Los Angeles Olympics, just as a historical note. So that might be a presage of what we will or will not be getting. Trump, of course, is in a hissy fit at the moment because the Supreme Court ruled 6-3 that his illegal tariffs are illegal. Surprise. Maybe they could have sent him a memo in advance to just say, no, you can't do that. We'll have to rule against you if you try, instead of making all this rigmarole and a mess. But the wussy Supreme Court, the Trumpista court, is not exactly Johnny on the spot on these things. But anyway, this will be the ongoing act because Trump is absolutely addicted to these tariffs. His brain is spiraling more and more back into the 1970s when he was obsessed with them then. And it doesn't look like it's going to change. But anyway, on to the Luskin list. They're starting to look like they're kind of dredging some bottoms of their footnotes in this area, because we're in a bunch of papers from 2016, which is a decade old now, and almost that old when they're a list compiled. And it's continuing to say things that we all that ALUs are perfectly capable of forming little cross links, and that's how they can end up doing themselves into things and being detected by systems that detect them and all that kind of stuff. 3 papers, of which we'll be able to put up the direct link for all 3 of them. But what's interesting that struck me on this is, of the 3, 2 of them got their dates missed in the Luskin list. The first one, the Catelli paper, it was issue 12, which I guess whoever compiled the citation thought that meant that it was the December issue. Nope, sorry, 11 October. That's often the case with ones that have weekly or ongoing issues. You can't assume that issue number 12 is December, then issue number 7 is July, et cetera, et cetera. Could be, but in this case, no. And then the other, the Chilon paper, that one they at least got the date right. And then the Yu et al. Paper was overshot because they said it was 31 December, but it's the November issue. So eccentricities there. Are they paying close attention to the content? Are they paying attention to the content at all? Because I said, all of these things are perfectly reasonable papers for identifying how these little ALU cross sections are doing. And because it's a decade old work, it's just starting to burrow into areas that the more recent papers that they've been citing from the 2020s have built on and have evaluated. So in this laundry list of stuff, it's going to be kind of funky to find out how many of them are relatively older papers. In my spreadsheet that I'm keeping track of, I'm listing all, cataloging them by what decade they're in. And I was assuming initially that they were really going to be making heavy guns from stuff that's quite recent. But looks like they're also doing a lot of padding from older material that they may not be really paying close attention to. And I can pretty much guarantee you that anything that's, the older it gets, the more likely it is it's just reinforcing the points that we've already been making. If you're going to have a cutting edge of somebody deciding that ALUs have vastly more functionality than what the current science would indicate, it's going to be in papers that are in the last few years. So pretty much prima facie is going to be kind of what's in that respect, but we'll find that out as we go. So continuing to plow ahead on the Noah's Lost World chapter, about ready to launch into my whales section, where we'll be bringing up to speed how creationists have misunderstood that, because here, the underlying trope here is that there is a world that ought to have existed if the flood geology were true. There would have been a pre-flood world with land arranged in one and only one way, that any given spot on the planet would have been something, and you need to figure out what that is if you have a model. But that is not we have ever got in anything remotely like any amount of details. The closest you get are kind of cartoons, the notion of ecological zonation that a few people were playing around with, and Ord and a few others kind of wrinkle with the same idea. His little beds hypothesis that there's been like a kind of a roller coaster of water sloshing up and down, and little exposed areas where critters are coming up and getting trapped and then flooded, turning into rock. Lithification problem that doesn't go away. I mean, it's hilarious to kind of watch this stuff, but it ain't anywhere. And when you actually start diving into the details of what is existing when, how come we're getting the geological representation that we do, and frankly, airborne critters and aquatic critters are terrible, because it's not that they should have been on the ark, although maybe they should have been on the ark, freshwater fishes versus all of that. But the sheer volume of the fact that you've got all these critters supposedly living in the seas simultaneously makes you wonder, why aren't we ever getting them sloshed together? And likewise for aerial creatures. How come no pterosaurs ever show up in the same spot as a bat or a condor? Likewise, there are never any instances when a mosasaur and a plesiosaur and a dolphin get smooshed into the same deposit. None, zero. And that paleobiogeographical representation is one of the many fatal reasons why flood geology is never going to make sense. And we'll be amused to see if they ever try to deal with it. But given how lethargic that they've been on the subject in general, I've finished up my biogeography info box for the chapter. There's not a lot that they've dealt with there. And we're offering several examples of creationists quite recently who are stumbling right into this issue flat on and not noticing that they're there. Hummingbirds and a lot of these others that have very specific biogeographical histories to them that you would need to account for in a flood context as to why they're found in the rocks they are and why their distribution is what they are today. And if they're flitting off of the ark, which presumably all the birds were, then I think they allot basically by families, so it's something like 185 or something like that. I'm sure they're drawing off of Leitner's analysis that she did of how many avian barrowmans there were. This has been like 2013, so it's been a few years ago. But the fact that the number matches up with what's in the Ark Encounter means, yeah, that's virtually certain. Would be fun to know for certain, because they don't bother with the referencing. At no point have they ever tried to document why they are picking the critters they do and on what criteria they are doing so. Because the vast majority of them, certainly there's been no baromenological analysis on most of them. So they're basically just throwing darts at the evolutionary framework, and if it lands on a family, bingo, that's a barrowman. And it's getting listed in the Ark Encounter in the evolutionary order systematically in most all of the cases, especially for mammals. So we're going to be going into that, and it will become painfully obvious when we start looking at the order in which the things are shown on the chart. That's the dead giveaway, that they're really just riffing off of evolutionary systematics without ever providing source citations for them. So that's going to be a little fun little bit. Plus, there are areas where, as usual, creationists are at loggerheads as to what's what. Oh, hello, Vesta. Yes, it's we're zipping along in our little program here. I'm kind of semi-pooped from having worked rearranging and sorting stuff. I'm resorting structures and getting all my notes from intelligent design versus creationism versus criticism of stuff, and rearranging things in closets and that to get more storage space and tidy up material, as well as the sorting factory for the various chapters and books to come. Every so often I have to go through this kind of triage thing when you get overwhelmed with the background information, and I can sympathize with was pretty much doing the same thing, of where you need to be able to find your information and organize it to be able to burrow your way through it intelligently. And he developed a series of little note cards and stuff that he put in the cabinets and that to kind of keep track of stuff. And it's the same kind of structure that I had to do, except it's dealing often with folders that are representing particular books or particular journal things, and make sure that I've got the system to the space to be able to store everything away after everything is cited, or if it's going to be used for a subsequent chapter or book, to be able to. And there's a bunch of things on what Jackson and I have planned. Jackson and I have a couple of books planned beyond Roxford there. And there may be more before the dust is settled. But I have probably a few that I can pull out of a hat, or Jackson and I can work on them collaboratively. We see what goes on down there. And has expressed the intent at some point he wants to fly me down to Louisiana so I can actually meet him and his wife and all that in person, because I haven't been able to deal with that. And weren't able to latch up together in that. So all of our collaboration has been done over the stupid YouTube screen, emails, and all the rest. But at some point, it may be possible that we will be in the same room together. Yeah. Well, we'll find that out as we go. Anyway, much to do, much to write, much to work on. And the goal being to keep up to date with, we're constantly adding in, and we'll be doing so right up to the time we finalize the texts and make it a physical book that you can buy, to make sure that any incoming information, there's cosmological stuff, there's brand new paleontological papers that bear on the pointed issue. There's the ongoing Epstein squabble, because these Epstein files have blown up so much. There's an awful lot of people who are showing up in really unpleasant ways in there, including Lawrence Krauss and Mirvold and a few others that are people that are coming up in the discussion of scientific topics. And so a little footnote going in saying, ooh, there's some little problems going on there with the Epstein files with these people, Richard Dawkins and others. So we're trying to be aware of the larger context of things, even as we are dealing with the historical background of all of that stuff. So anyway, ongoing, having fun, and we're still having interesting encounters on Twitter. I refuse to call it X, of where creationists, a few that just keep poking their little heads up and repeating the same junk over and over again as if nobody has a memory. Well, maybe some of the people they deal with don't, but we do. And we can keep track of things, and we know topics, and we can bring things up, and we can quiz them on stuff. And if they don't have a case to make and they don't really understand, they're just trying to troll, it's really easy to spot them as such, because they're never going to be able to get anywhere to discuss a point. They never get to a point. In which case, what point is there? Tremendously boring. And that's why a lot of these people, not just me, but others, will either mute them or overt block them, because they're just wheel spinners. And you get a hell of a lot of that in a lot of different contexts, whatever social platform media you deal with, which I think will be a dead giveaway that you're dealing with a Tortugan mind, or just somebody who's being tendentious and they're just trolling just to, they have nothing better to do. No, how boring, how dreary. Meanwhile, I'm writing books and creating things, and our politique game. Friend Peter, who is the 3D printer guy, put a post up. For those of you who follow me on Facebook page, you can see a picture of me and playing with his daughter, doing a test game of the developing pieces as we're moving into production mode and trying to figure out how we can make all the things and making adjustments to the color of stuff. Dark brown that we had originally chosen for the brown color is really too dark. It's way similar to the purple color. And so we've had to change to a lighter brown, and we're phasing in that material and printing the panels and things to do. And little bit by little bit by little bit, we got a little money tray, got that worked out. Don't you hate games that where they've got money in there, but there's no place to put them into little stock trays so that you can keep track of them during the game? Monopoly typically would have little paper slots that you can put money in, which is better than nothing. But we have we'll have little curvature slices on it that will be used for being able to pull the money up. And it's also acting as a little platform that our rule book fits down on. And all of that stacks on top of all of our little game components that are inside the box. It'll be really, really tight origami precision structure when we're all done. It's really fun to work out the three-dimensional structures of all of that. It's amazing the kinds of things that can be done in that area. So anyway, let me put up my thank you note for our folk who are sticking with the old geezer here and helping out with the Patreon. Navigating around through my stupid little window again. There we go. And again, remind everybody, colleagues, researchers, assistant researchers, friends, and legacy patrons that always be mindful of your own financial condition. We may be hitting really rough water ahead. And if you have to bail out on the Patreon thing, I will be sad, but it's understandable. And of course, if you have been watching the show or paying attention to things and go, no, I can plump down $5 a month for, and then thank you, thank you, thank you. But at any rate, always be mindful of all of that because we live in tumultuous times, and I think they're going to get more tumultuous before they get less tumultuous. So this is a thing that everybody needs to be mindful of. Entering different USA and Europe when it comes to Epstein, Europe is taking, yes, that's, I think, an extremely important point that technically speaking, the Prince Edward, now not Prince Edward, was our Duke of Whatsits. I don't pay too much attention to all of that stuff. Was being hauled in because he had been sharing privileged information and secret-y kinds of stuff with Epstein. The kinds of stuff that supposedly Hillary Clinton was being accused of and never panned out. So it's an interesting bit about even somebody in the royal family. King Charles has basically said the law has to be applied, and there it goes. Compared to over here, where we have the crooks in charge of the laws, and Trump wants to make things everything he goes. But as we've been seeing from this tariff issue, is that even some of his own appointees are not rubber stamping him, which of course makes his megalomania go all the more intense. You've seen the megalomania where he put his big mug up on a big banner up in the front of the Justice Department, as if the Justice Department is like his property. Sorry, no, it's our property. He's a custodian, but the Justice Department is not a private law firm to serve President Trump. And I seriously think he doesn't understand that. And the people who he has brought in don't understand that. And how many of them are going to still have a law license after some of these things are over? Because the laws are going to grind on. My Lord, the number of lawsuits that are going to be deluging all these people once they're out of office. And they're all likely to be going exactly the same direction that Rudy Giuliani did. And if any of them have law practices, it's going to be shredded. A lot of them will be disbarred. People are going to be suing up the yin yang. And the more you violate people's rights, the more people are there to sue. And there are an awful lot of lawyers that are perfectly mindful of doing exactly that. So beware what you do in the way of illegality, Trump 2.0. The reckoning may be delayed, but it ain't going to stop, not unless you can become a complete tyranny. And I don't think the Trumpistas are clever enough to do that. They're way too incompetent to be proper, ruthless tyrants. And Trump would prefer to just go off and golf and make unpleasant farting sounds. Apparently, it's incontinence and a few other things. Maybe an increase. He's sounding more and more like Henry VIII in the late years, frankly, which is not a pretty picture if you know anything about the later health conditions of Henry VIII. Yes, we will not go into details on that. At any rate, let's put up our little advert for Rocks for Their Volume 1 that Peter delightfully did. And come on, little screen. Bum 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 bum. And we get our share screen. I will imagine that Peter will be coming up with a new version when we get Volume 2 done and in the mix. and it is not at all unfeasible that we will be probably making the rounds, either I or Jackson, with various people who have are aware of the books and interviewed us previously. Paulogia did. We may be doing something on Dan Stone Cardinale's thing, Dapper Dino, Erica. Many people may be intriguing to do such a thing. Vice Rhino, you can give a heads up to that as you did on your show of Volume 1. And as proud as we were of Volume 1, wait till you see what we got in Volume 2. Because here, of course, we're dealing four square with the details of the flood geology scenario. And we've had 5 or 6 years of new technical literature that's popped along. And we're dealing with the human evolution aspect, which is the super core obsession of anti-evolutionists. And so that's the one we're going to be hitting full out. Plus, one that I'm especially proud of is the cosmology chapter. That it's a monster, but functionally, I couldn't see any counterpart to it in the anti-creationist lexicon. There's little bits and pieces of stuff at Talk Origins. There's occasional stray posts on particular topics, but relatively limited. And so a full court press sweep of what the creationist viewpoint is, particularly from the Answers books, which almost clears the field. There's relatively little on it outside of Answers in Genesis and their core group of apologists. And when you look at how badly their analyses are and have been for at least the last decade, I think it's really will be an important piece of scholarship to settle in with all of this stuff to where people can see all of the ups and downs and ins and outs and get up to speed on what galaxies are forming when and what Hilbert objects are forming what and what early stages of population 3 stars there are. I mean, there's a lot of stuff in there, and sorting out all the terminology and the characters and elements going on and the nuances was a daunting task, and filtering it into cross-check to make sure, aren't creationists keeping up with some of this stuff? And in many cases, no, they're not. And that's in the small handful of under a handful of creationists who have some expertise in this area, Danny Faulkner and Jason Lyle and that bunch. But it's a threadbare bunch and a threadbare bunch of conclusions, and so boring and drab compared to the just fabulous cosmological information that is available, and it's just coming in ever more so now that we've got even more sophisticated instruments. The JWST telescope was, creationists were just holding out the hope that this was going to just blow to smithereens the cosmological models of those nasty evolutionists. And nope, sorry, not giving up at all. It's a delight. It's just as much of a pleasure as the fossil record would be to Charles Darwin. So anyway, and I'm a little bit of croupy here. Weather's turned kind of cold here in Spokane, although not bad. We've been spared any snow so far. Cross fingers. Because my back can easily avoid having to shovel the 40-foot driveway. But anyway, everybody stay super safe for whatever circumstances, whether it's weather or rampaging ice people or any of the other mucky things that could be going on. And watch out for the wooden penguins. And we will be catching you all next week when we will be exploring more of how collagen fibers ain't rescuing Sarfatian Tay. So everybody stay safe. And until next week, we will be ending our stream.